Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
Hello, and welcome back to Eating W's. After the NFC Championship and AFC Championship games, which just happened last week, a few days ago, since we are recording this on Tuesday, the 29th, the stage is set for the Super Bowl. It'll officially be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Just as I predicted, it is exactly what it was 2 years ago, like we made the jokes about. And I actually go 6 for 6 between the divisional round and championship game in our pick'em, which is pretty crazy. I mean, I really didn't expect to do that myself, but I will certainly take it. So for today's episode of Eating W, since the Super Bowl is not going to be next week, we have the Pro Bowl and all of those festivities first, but there's not really actually that much to talk about with the Pro Bowl or prediction-wise or anything like that. So today's episode is not a prediction episode, nor is it a recap episode. It is much more of a true reaction, much more of a true look back episode, because we will be reviewing our beautiful predictions that we put together at the very start of the year, before the regular season. I think maybe even before the preseason, or maybe like during the preseason. I can't remember exactly when we did it, but I know for sure it was before week 1. We're going to look back and see how close we were, and then kind of reshuffle everything and see what it actually ended up being and just how far off we were. Because let me tell you, we did do good in some places, but we did really bad in other places. But before we jump into that, just a few kind of news bits here. Now that much more of the coach hiring process has gone through, and now I believe it is 6 of the 7 teams who are looking for a head coach right now have their coaches in place. We thought we would do kind of an update there. 2 of them that we already talked about in last week's episode. The Patriots were the first to hire by hiring Mike Vrabel, and then the Chicago Bears followed them up by hiring last year's Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. But some of the new ones that happened since last week's episode is the New York Jets going on the other side of the ball for the Lions and hiring last year Lion defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, who also used to play for the Jets, if I'm not mistaken.
Former
So
Jets cornerback.
he will be back in the gang green, which is pretty cool for him. And then next up on the list, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who hired last year's Bucs offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. So it should be a good chance for him to kind of show himself after having a breakout season with the Baker Mayfield at the helm and the rest of the Bucs offense. And then after that, we have what is kind of, in my opinion, the shocker of the whole hiring process so far. The Las Vegas Raiders actually went to the retirement bucket and pulled former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll out of retirement to come to Vegas and try to right the ship there in Vegas after having a few tumultuous seasons. And then finally, in going from the most surprising to what I think is probably just the sheer dumbest, in my opinion at least. Okay, everyone has their own opinion.
Most disappointing.
The most disappointing coach hiring, the Dallas Cowboys actually just less hire and more just move up their offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. I knew I was going to mess it up before. I said I'm going to try to remember it, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to. Cal informed me that's actually the son of a former head coach of both the Browns and the Chargers way back when in the 90s and 2000s. Marty Schottenheimer?
Marty Schottenheimer.
I had heard the name, not really new to me, or not really ringing a bell overly to me, but I had heard it. But if you're a little bit of an older fan, or maybe like some of the older football history, I'm sure you've heard it. But kind of fun to see the lineage continue with the head coaching trees, but we'll see what he's actually able to do. And then that 7th team that's still waiting on their head coach is none other than the New Orleans Saints, who, if you remember, just last offseason, or maybe the offseason before, I can't remember for sure, the last time they were in their coaching search, they were also the last team to hire their coach and kind of got stuck with Dennis Allen, and we saw how that worked out. So a little shocked that they didn't kind of jump the gun a little more and try to get ahead of the curve, but yet here we are with them still waiting on a head coach. So we'll see who they end up falling with this year. So that was the update for the head coaching search, and I'm sure next week around, I imagine the Saints have a head coach by then. I can't imagine that they're actually still waiting at that
You'd
point.
think they'd be waiting much longer.
Exactly. You got to go get somebody. I mean, literally just anybody at this point. Get the ball rolling. But now that we are past that and past kind of the small update on our Pick'em game, we are going to jump straight into our kind of look back. To open this, I will take a picture of this so you can see it a little better and put it up on the screen now. So that'll be up there. You can kind of get a decent look at it now when it's a little closer. I'll probably make a little marking to show the 3 teams that we picked as our 3 wild card teams to start the year, and then we'll talk about them through this as well. But that is kind of that picture, just so you can see a better look of it. It'll also be behind us the whole time, but just a little harder to see when it's kind of way back here compared to just up on the screen. But we'll get rolling with what we actually got right.
Yes.
There are 2 divisions that we went perfect on. Possibly the 2 easiest divisions to predict, but we still did go perfect on both of them, and that is, of course, the AFC West and the AFC East. With the AFC East, we got it straight in line with the Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots, and the West, we got it straight in line with the Chiefs, Chargers, the Broncos, Raiders. Where we went wrong is probably right smack dab in the middle of those 2 with that AFC North. I mean, we were so far off. I let Callan talk me into it. I went with the Browns, and they disappointed.
They were a bad disappointment this season. Deshaun Watson was not what I thought he was going to be, and he might not be again because he actually re-tore his Achilles.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
So his whole rehab has reset. So he may not be back till the start of He may not be back for the start of next season.
I thought that the worst trade I would ever see in my life was going to be that DeAndre Hopkins, David Johnson trade back with Bill O'Brien on the Texans when they sent D-Hop to the Cardinals. But this one has just been worse. I don't know if it'll ever be topped. I don't even think Ditka trading away the whole team for that running back.
No, the whole draft
Ricky Williams,
for Ricky Williams, that might be one of them. But
I mean, just it wasn't even necessarily a bad trade when it first happened because it did have some upside. It definitely had a chance to end up being a really good situation, but it's the contract and it's just Deshaun Watson, really. I mean, he just hasn't been it. He has looked terrible. Even healthy at the start of this year, he just looked bad.
He did.
The Browns were just as successful, of course, last year with Joe Flacco. They were much more successful. But even this year with guys like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and especially even Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston had
they just looked like a better team without Deshaun Watson on the field. I don't know how you get out of that contract, what dead cap you have to end up eating, but I think we might see the Browns do anything to get out of that contract.
I think that possibly next year, but this will be swapped. Or this what happened this year and what will happen next year is this was swapped. Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Didn't Pittsburgh win the North?
The Ravens won it.
Oh, the Ravens won the North.
Pittsburgh were a very close second.
That's right. They were in the lead all season.
They choked it away at the end big time.
That's right.
Definitely.
So we had that pretty wrong there. We had the Bengals right at third.
Yeah, we did it. Hey, we got one.
Got 1 out of 3.
1 for 4. There
we go. The Ravens, I figured they would be good. I figured they'd be a lot worse, and they started out that way, but they really got their shit together and really turned it around and had a stellar season. Lamar Jackson might end up winning MVP. Derrick Henry might end up winning Offensive Player of the Year. So they ended up having a really good season and really surprised me in the end because I thought they'd do much worse throughout this season.
Yeah, definitely. The AFC North was a hard one to pick this year. I mean, there's divisions that are always a little more of a toss-up than other divisions, but it was definitely one that was kind of a no man's land. Whoever you wanted to throw at the top there really had a chance. I think the Ravens probably were the obvious pick, for lack of a better, I guess the kind of the betting favorites is how I should say it. But it really could have been any of them, and it really almost was any of them throughout the entire season, except for maybe the Browns, who we had at first. But hey, you win some, you lose some. Moving over to the AFC South to kind of finish out talking about the AFC column-wise, We had the Texans win that one, so we were correct there.
I think we were right, except for 3 and 4.
Yep, but you just got to flip those last two, and then the Jaguars really should have done better.
Really, the Texans ran away with this division.
Oh gosh, yeah, they won the division at like
I want to say week 11.
It was
12.
It was so early. It was like I think it was a little more like 14 or 15.
It might have been
but
later
not
on.
only was it so early, it was with a terrible record.
Yeah,
they had like
one of the worst records of the division.
Yeah, it was so funny. I think every wild card team had a better record than them at one point, and they had locked in their division. It was like, wait a second, that's not how it's supposed to go. No. That doesn't add up. But yeah, that was pretty crazy to see. And then they did end up winning a playoff game, which was cool for them to see as well, because the Chargers are just the Chargers, the Vikings of the AFC, no doubt about it. But yeah, I really thought that the Jacksonville Jaguars had a chance early in the year. They kind of had things rolling with Trevor Lawrence at the end of last year. I mean, everything was looking up for them. And then really the only bright spot they had this year was Brian Thomas Jr., if you want to be completely honest, which, don't get me wrong, was a very bright spot. That guy looks like he's going to be a beast. But when your only bright spot is a rookie wide receiver, and you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, that's
that whole offense. ETN, Christian Kirk.
They picked up Gabe Davis in the offseason.
Total flat.
It was looking up in Jacksonville, but it only went down from there.
It did.
So now moving on past the actual divisions themselves and more looking at the playoff picture. Out of the seven total teams that we could have gotten for the playoffs, I don't know why I forgot the number of that all of a sudden. But out of these 7 total teams that we could have gotten correct, I believe that we got 1, 2, 3. So I guess I should say the ones that we picked to be our playoff teams were, of course, the 4 division winners, and then we picked the Dolphins, Ravens, and Jaguars. So I think that we were 5 for 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Bills, Texans, Chiefs, Ravens.
Yep, spot on.
Dolphins didn't make it. They got eliminated at the end of the season.
Correct, because the 3 we were missing was, of course, the Steelers, who ended up being the 5 seed, or 6 seed even, actually.
Yep.
And we had them way down there. And then we had
Chargers.
Both AFC West teams that we did not have in, but they both made it.
Very surprising.
Very surprising and very cool to see for Bo Nix. That was one thing that, I mean, we had the Broncos there at 3, and if I remember correctly, when we did this episode, our only argument that we had about the Broncos was if they should be 4, let alone at 3. And then they ended up actually being at 3, but a wild card team 3, a really strong 3. So that was really cool to see for Bo Nix and the rest of the Denver Broncos, who are a pretty young team overall, except for at head coach, but player-wise, very young team. So we ended up going 4 for 7 in the playoff race. The big one that really surprised me was, of course, as I already touched on a little bit, the Jaguars. But the Broncos making it was probably the second biggest shocker behind the Jaguars.
And then the Dolphins, like I said, they were fighting for it till the end. The Dolphins and the Colts, but both of them got eliminated in week 17 and 18, I believe.
Yep.
Simultaneously.
Week 18 had that crazy thing where it was winning in for the Broncos. But then if the Broncos lost, then it was winning in for the Dolphins. And then if the Dolphins and the Broncos lost, the Bengals would have slipped in with the win against the Pittsburgh Steelers, what they picked up in Week 18. So just an absolutely insane finish to that 7 seed, but nonetheless cool to see. So now we will jump on down to the NFC side of things and the other half over here. Probably the one that we should start with is the worst singular division we had. A division in which we got 0 out of 4 correct, which is almost more impressive than getting 4 out of 4. If you ask me,
we had to pick all wrong.
It's much harder to do that, and that is, of course, the NFC West. Rather ironic that we went perfect in one West and absolutely zeroed out in the other West. But this was a hard division to pick, regardless. But especially a hard division to pick with how everything shook out this year. The way we have it, or had it, I should say, is the 49ers, Cardinals as like a shocker second, and then the Rams and the Seahawks, and the actual ones ended up being the Rams at 1, Seahawks 2, Cardinals 3, and the 49ers 4. So our number 1 ended up being the number 4. It was such an unpredictable season for all 4 of these teams.
What happened in the AFC North.
Yeah, there you go. At least,
we have a pattern here.
top or bottom, at least we didn't put them in the middle.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tough one to pick. The 49ers had probably one of the biggest fall from graces I've seen in a while. Just a really bad season comparatively. We were almost right on the Cardinals. They were playing pretty good football, but they're just still a little young, still a little before their time on everything.
I think they're going to be good next season.
I really do too. I mean, if we do this again, I'm putting the Cardinals right there again, if not higher. So I'm all in for that next year. But then, yeah, I guess us putting the Rams at 3 was a little silly considering all the talent that offense.
I thought their defense would be much weaker than it was, but Jared Verse and Brian Fisk.
Yep, Brian. I think it's like Fisky or something. Yeah.
I said to you earlier or during the playoff game, Brian Fisk and Jared Verse equal one Aaron Donald.
They really do.
So they were able to replace that production, which is very good for the Rams and very surprising. I didn't expect that to happen, and that's the key to why they were able to reach the top of that NFC West.
Yeah, and then Kobe Turner and Brandon Fisk. That's what it is. I think it's Brandon.
Yeah.
I think it's Brandon Fisk. But Kobe Turner and Brandon Fiske also combined for one Aaron Donald if you look at them in the middle there, because Kobe Turner is sneaky good too.
Yeah.
He had a very good season, a very much
a
breakout
good rookie season last year.
Yep.
So yeah, did not have a sophomore slump at all.
I have never seen a team pick those late round picks so perfectly like the Rams do. It is
Kyron Williams
absolutely
was a 5th round pick.
Puka and Cup are both outside of first round.
Yep, Cup was a 3rd rounder.
I want to say their entire offensive line was drafted and developed and outside of the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty sure.
Just, it's mind-blowing what they're able to do there.
Because they traded all those first-round picks and early round picks.
They just didn't
have all they had was to focus on the late-round gems.
That's
actually, they were able to find them.
That's kind of the way to do it when you don't have to put in the same focus as everybody else and you're just looking at the other guys. That's actually a really good point. It probably does help out quite a bit. I never really thought about that.
Find guys like Cup, Nakua, and Kyron Williams who had a great season.
That guy just always has a great season. He is the face of consistency. But then, of course, to finish it out, we had the Seahawks there at 4, who I thought that they would be higher. I did not think they'd be 2. I think my argument was more to move them up to 3, maybe 2. But they ended up being 2. They were in the race for the playoffs, in the race for the division for a while,
up till the end.
But just kind of fell short at the end. With the
Seahawks also did much better than I expected. I thought they would be one of the worst teams in the NFL, but they surprised me by at least attaining 2nd in the NFC West.
Which is not as impressive as it seems this year around.
It was.
but they did get it, so participation trophy for them. But then moving past that, we'll just move it from right to left, going to the NFC South. We were relatively accurate on the NFC South there. I mean, the Falcons and the Buccaneers were fighting for it all year. I think I wanted the Buccaneers, if I remember correctly, at 1, but I was more than happy with the Falcons being at 1. Kirk Cousins looked like he was going to be an absolute menace in Atlanta, but that very much fell short and crashed very quickly. But Michael Penix was able to kind of pick things up at the end of the year. Bijan had a very good year. I want to say he had...
They're finally getting Bijan Robinson the ball.
I think he was 3rd in rushing yards in the league. I think it was Saquon, Henry, Bijan, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong on that.
I can't sure.
He was at least top 5.
Saquon and Henry were 1 and 2.
Oh, by a lot.
By a long shot. And then 3 was way far down there. But still, that's still good to be top 5.
Still top 5, still top 3, whichever one ended up being. So good stuff for him. And then, of course, the Panthers and the Saints were very obviously both not going to have great seasons. Just like Kirk Cousins, the Saints looked like they were going to prove us wrong.
Yes, they started out...
The first 2 weeks, I think Derek Carr had like 7 touchdowns in the first 2 weeks.
The first one, they started out 3-0, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then went on a 9-game losing streak.
It was absolutely crazy. I mean, the only thing worse than Kirk Cousins crash and burn personally was the Saints crash and burn as an entire unit. Just decimated by injury. Fired Dennis Allen relatively early in the year. I want to say about halfway through, somewhere in that area. Just complete chaos constantly there in New Orleans. It was a bummer.
It continues to be.
Yeah, and exactly. We already talked about it. They haven't even hired their next head coach yet, because who the hell wants to go deal with that? No one's chomping at the bit to go down to New Orleans right now, unless you're going to the Super Bowl. So But yeah, they were kind of going to be at the bottom regardless. But it was a pretty good fight there for the top with the Falcons and the Bucks. That was a fun one to watch.
Baker Mayfield had another outstanding season. I think he's going to be a perennial MVP candidate.
Oh, okay. I like it. I love it, actually. We'll see what he's able to do without Liam Cohen, who we just mentioned.
That's true. Yeah, another new offensive coordinator, which is, I want to say, his 8th and 7th seasons, or his 7th and 8th seasons.
He seems to almost thrive off that, though.
Seems to.
The coordinator hopping does relatively well for him. I think he's just able to kind of fight through things more than it does well for him. But still, hey, you find a way to survive. And then moving on over to the North, we were pretty close on this one as well. The only one that we got wrong here was flipping the Vikings and the Packers. Vikings had a very shocking season, which ended in a very unshocking, very Viking-like way, with Sam Darnold leading them to a 14-3 record, and then proceeding to choke a Week 18 that could have been a first-round bye, and then proceeded to play even worse in a wild card game that could have moved us on to the next round. So really sucked to see, but nonetheless, a good season like that, a playoff appearance is really cool. And we talked about it a lot just the past few weeks on, will Darnold stay? How much do you pay Darnold? Yada, yada. I mean, at one point the question wasn't does he stay? It's how much do you pay him? Because he was just playing. He was just playing that
MVP
well.
Contender.
I mean, after the Week 17 Packers game, there was no arguing that he was a Viking, and then he proceeded to follow it up with 2 of the worst games, maybe of his career, which is saying something because it has not been a stellar career to say the least.
This was his first career winning season.
Yeah, and 14-3 as a
14-3. Yeah, so.
But even back then, I said that I didn't overly want to re-sign him because you see these one-hit wonders happen, these one-year wonders happen. So
Keenum comes to mind.
I was always much more of a happy it happened, glad it's over type idea, and he very much proved me right. So now it moves on to the era of McCarthy, and if he's able to come back healthy and be completely healthy from that injury.
Unless you sign Aaron Rodgers.
Oh my God, there's no way. They can't do it again. It'd be literally the exact path of Favre.
Complete the prophecy.
It would be the exact path of Favre, going from the Packers to 2 years with the Jets.
Nope.
Favre might have done 1.
He only did 1 year with the Jets.
Favre did 1 with the Jets. Rodgers technically only did 1. I mean, if you really want to look at it.
Technically, because of the whole Achilles
And then to, of course, the Vikings. I don't want it. I'd rather take my risk with McCarthy. I'm not super high on him. I think he looks
not
good.
Ready. That's the only thing I would worry about.
Yeah.
If McCarthy's not ready due to injury or whether just pro ready, maybe you franchise tag Darnold. I've been saying that for.
Or maybe you put Daniel Jones and Danny
That's
Dimes
right.
in there.
Forget they put Daniel
We
Jones
do have Daniel
on
Jones,
the practice squad,
which is just
perhaps they already planned for next year.
We at one point our quarterback room, our number 4 like full emergency QB was Nick Mullins, who I don't really like Nick Mullins, but he's not bad. Like he's a backup on a lot of teams, and he was our number 4. It was crazy, so that was kind of cool. But that's in the past. Now it's just a bunch of question marks again. But yeah, nonetheless, Vikings had a really good season. This was really like the equivalent to the AFC West. It was really the division this year. Yep. If you look at team for team in that skill level, I mean, even the Bears at one point had a winning record and looked like they were going up. And then the whole Hail Mary thing happened with the Commanders, and then that led to a 9-game losing streak, something like that. A huge losing streak. So it was a very fitting Bears ending to a season. But yeah, we did actually pretty good in this division for how shocking it was. Of course, 3 total playoff teams in that division, with the Packers. The Packers getting the 7 seed at what? 11-6?
12.
12-5, and you're the 7 seed.
Our 5 losses were the 4 to the Vikings and the Lions, and then the 1 to the Eagles.
To the Eagles in the first week. That is absolutely crazy to be fighting for your playoff lives at 12-5 and just barely sneak in. Just absolutely insane.
It was 11-6. The Bears beat us at the.
Oh, that Week 18, when it didn't.
When we had already clinched the 7 seed. And,
So yeah, it didn't really matter. But I was gonna say I thought it was 11-6, but still, regardless, should be 12-5. Was 11-6 and just barely making the playoffs. It's just wild, no matter how you look at it. Yeah, that was definitely a fun division to watch this year. And then finally with the NFC East, and maybe the letdown of the whole year, as well as the surprise of the whole year, probably in the same division
Both in
here.
the same division.
We, of course, had the Cowboys at the top, which I think a lot of people did, and they ended up being in third only because the only one we got right, the New York Giants, locked in that fourth spot. They had a terrible season, just like a lot of people thought they probably would. But the Cowboys did give them a run for their money. It was looking like they could have gotten that fourth spot a couple of times throughout the year. But then, of course, you just move those two up, and then that's exactly how you have it. The Eagles take the division. They were the number 2 seed. They actually had a worse record than the Vikings, but just how the seedings work, they ended up being the 2 seed. And they, with how the Vikings played at the end of the year, probably were a better team. So they probably did.
In the end,
they probably did deserve
Sam
that
Darnold came back down to earth. And
yeah. Well, I guess they're in the Super Bowl, so they definitely deserve the 2 seed. I can't really discount them too much. But yeah, the Eagles move up to that 1 seed, and then of course the shocker of the year that we were talking about was Jaden Daniels. I was personally low on Jaden Daniels, but when I say shocker of the year, I wasn't saying that like everyone thought he was going to be bad. Just no one knew he was going to be this damn good. I mean, to make it to the NFC Championship game, your rookie year, to be so composed and win so many one-possession games the way he did is just absolutely mind-blowing. It's so impressive that he did that. So really good year for Jaden Daniels. Hopefully we don't see like a CJ Stroud-esque sophomore slump. I say CJ Stroud-esque because he didn't truly have a sophomore slump because like he did worse. He just didn't do as good as he did. And I think that's something that we probably will see from Jaden Daniels just because it's going to be hard to match that magic or do even better. So I don't think we'll see him do bad. I just don't know if we'll see quite the magic that he had this rookie season.
Right. They might not get back to the NFC title game again.
Exactly. Because just how do you replicate that? It was just an insane run. But yeah, very good team there in Washington. It was from the start, you knew it was a good team. The only 2 question marks were your quarterback and your head coach, which are 2 pretty big positions to be question marks.
Yeah.
But when they both hit the way they did with Dan Quinn's aggressive play style and then the calm and collectiveness of Jaden Daniels, when both the question marks hit, of course you have a pretty damn good season.
And it all turned on that Hail Mary.
It really did.
It all did. That's 2 franchises that went 2 separate ways that season.
Literally. What's the superhero in the X-Men? Is it Rogue? That when she touches people, she like drains their lives and like takes their power. The Commanders quite literally just put their hand on the head of Caleb Williams and he just took everything from the Bears. It was quite entertaining to watch as a Vikings fan. But so yeah, that was kind of our breakdown or our thoughts and looking back on what we did. Mostly wrong, but some right, and a lot of completely unpredictable. So I sure don't feel bad about getting some of these wrongs. The only one I'm really like, that one could have seen coming was maybe like the Browns, but I think a lot of the other ones were truly shockers, like hard to. And I agreed with you. Browns, I did. I thought the Ravens at first, but I saw the light. I came around, and I
remember one thing about it is I read some bad intel that Nick Chubb was going to start the season, and he ended up not starting until after week 7 or 8.
Yeah, and then he wasn't even really like a RB1 until probably like 12 or 13.
75% of the way through the season.
When it was already over.
Around, yeah. But so that bright spot for next year, if he stays, I don't even know where his contract situation is.
I'd imagine you stay. Coming off an injury like that, no reason not to. Been there his whole career. A lot of those running backs like that like to stay because
comeback player of the year next year.
Kind of a dime a dozen nowadays, like, unless you're maybe like Saquon or somebody like really high up echelon like that. But yeah, so that was kind of our
Saquon for MVP.
I hope Saquon. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I'd love to see it.
It should.
It's gonna be. He's gonna win offensive player of the year regardless. No doubt about it. It is a sham if he doesn't win that.
If he plays week 18 and breaks the record, he wins MVP.
You think?
But he ends up not playing week 18 and doesn't break the record.
To be honest, I still don't think he gets it just because it's a quarterback award. But I'd love to see it.
And they need to change it.
Oh, I completely agree.
They need to change it.
They should do, if they really want to do that, if they want to make it so obvious that the quarterback is the most important position in the league, they should have a QB of the year.
Yeah.
It should just be something you should win, and then you can actually spread the wealth, like share the love with the MVP position. Because God, like, when was the last time a defensive player won it? J.J. Watt in like 2012? Did he
win
even win
MVP?
it? I don't know.
Lawrence Taylor won it in '86. I want to say.
I think J.J. Watt did, but I mean, like, I don't even know because it's been a quarterback award
But
for so long.
I'm pretty
now.
sure that there has been a defensive MVP, and it was Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm like 90% sure on that. I might be wrong.
There's got to be at least one somewhere in the history, and I mean, if it's going to be someone, it makes sense that's Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of our look back. So now we were going to take a quick cut and kind of rearrange everything and see what it actually looks like now. And then not really talk too much about it since we already talked about mostly what happened, but just kind of in awe look at the comparison of just how wrong we were in some places.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't have to actually watch any of that cut. It'll just be a quick snap for you right now. And okay, there we go. Just like that, the board is how it was actually supposed to be now. Was that cut actually good? Probably not, but we will see in editing. I'm excited to see more than anything. Probably wasn't, but we'll see. Maybe we got lucky. But yes, this is how it actually ended up looking.
Turned out I was backwards the whole time.
Yeah. It's like, I wasn't even looking at the camera. But no, this is how it actually ends up looking. I'll take a quick picture and put it up now so you can, again, see it a little closer. But you can also see it while we're talking. Just a little easier to see it right now. Mm-hmm. But looking back on the board at the wall, we, of course, had our two pillars, our two top pillars of everything being correct. And then outside of that, it actually wasn't a ton of shifting around, except for, of course, like we mentioned here in the NFC West. And while we were moving them all around, I remembered that we actually didn't even talk about the playoff teams and our predictions in this one. But we talked about a little bit, and we actually, ironically, also went 4 for 7 in the NFC. The ones we got wrong in the NFC is we had the Cowboys over the Commanders. We had the Falcons when it was actually the Vikings. And then, of course, we had the Niners when it was actually the Rams who ended up making it. Yep. So kind of funny that we went 4 for 7 in both of them, considering you got your 4 and your 3 of your division winners and your 3 wild cards. But yeah, it all worked out pretty well. So yeah, it's just funny to look at it now because and then another thing that we realized we were wrong on, we were saying the Jaguars were second.
The Jaguars
they were
ended
actually
up being
flipped.
awful.
Yeah,
much more.
They literally ended up being worse. Can you imagine? And one of our arguments was the Tennessee Titans, who we ended up getting right, putting them at 4. But we talked about it a bunch that they might be the shocker team that kind of takes over the league.
I thought they'd be what the Commanders were.
But no, they stayed right at 4, and they did not even pretend to move. I mean,
they ended up trading away DeAndre Hopkins halfway through the season.
Yeah. I mean, the Jaguars did as bad as the Jaguars did, and they still couldn't even steal that 4th spot from them. It was almost the same situation that we had here in the NFC East with the Cowboys and the Giants.
In fact, the Titans did so bad, they have the 1st overall pick.
Ah, they do, yes. Oh. So what will the Titans get? It's such an interesting thing. I mean, the ironic part is, if I'm not mistaken, I was going to say the Patriots are 2, but no, they fell to 4, I believe. But the ironic part is whether it was going to be the Patriots before they won in Week 18 or if it ended up being the Titans. It's 2 teams that might not take a quarterback. Titans a little more likely than the Patriots, because the Patriots, it's an exaggeration with it being Week 18, but the Patriots might have 2 borderline starting rookie quarterbacks on their team.
Joe Milton.
What Drake May was able to do as the actual starter throughout the season was really impressive and really promising. And what we saw Joe Milton do, Joe Milton, a guy who I really liked heading into the draft and into the season, what we got to see him do in Week 18 was very promising as well. So, of course, with that Week 18, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but still pretty cool to see when a young guy like that.
Joe Milton is the new age Jacoby Brissett.
Yes, he probably will. He'll probably be a backup his whole life.
He'll be a backup, a spot starter.
He'll be out there at 35, still just launching it 85 yards down the field. That absolute cannon he has for a right arm. But yeah, so now you get to see the Titans there, who probably end up going quarterback. The whole Will Levis experience did not end up being as fun as it seemed like it was going to be.
Mason Rudolph a few games.
Mason Rudolph started games. They probably played just as good, if not better, when Mason Rudolph was starting in those games. So that's never too fun to see. And when you have that air raid offense, like with a head coach with Brian Callahan, even after losing D-Hop, you still have a pretty damn good receiver room with guys like Calvin Ridley and Nick Westbrook-Akine. So I imagine you take your lottery pick, you take your quarterback, whoever you deem as the number 1, whether it's Shadir.
Quarterback.
Because I think
they take Travis Hunter.
it's not like a quarterback draft this year. It's not
No.
like where there's that one guy. Like there's always that one guy, or maybe even 2 or 3 guys that it's like maybe they're the guy. But there's just not one of those this year.
Not this year.
I mean, I guess Shadir is probably the number one,
But he's not your prototypical style of quarterback.
exactly. He's a huge risk. I mean, a huge upside, but the floor is pretty damn minimal, if you ask me. I mean, just that with those pure athletic guys like that always have their really low floors because you just never know.
Have a lot of starts, which we've pointed out this season is very important to have.
Yeah.
Learning this year. So
yeah, Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. I mean,
both had
your top
starts.
2 quarterbacks were the 2 guys who started the most games throughout college. So at least with automatic success, that's a pretty obvious correlation there.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot more causation than correlation or anything like that. But yeah, so we'll have to see how that draft plays out, and that could really shake up. I mean, the whole top 4, you don't really know what they're going to take. Who else is on the top 4? It must be
Cleveland,
Titans, Cleveland, Vegas,
New
York's down there somewhere. I know for sure the Patriots are 4 because they went from 1 to 4 in week 18.
I think it's Cleveland and then New York.
And then 4 and probably like 5. That would make sense.
I think so.
Yeah.
Or maybe New Orleans is 5. I don't know. We haven't done a whole lot of draft prep yet.
Yeah, as you can tell. And the next episode's after next week, which is, of course, the Super Bowl prediction. We'll start getting into the draft. And, you know, we won't be sitting up here guessing like we are right now.
I know Tennessee's first.
Yeah, that's all we need to know. Well, yeah, so this is kind of how it actually shook out. A whole season down the books, or in the books now, a whole nother season down. Absolutely crazy to think about, but we cannot tell you how much we appreciate all the support through this season. We had a ton of episodes that got a ton of views, way more than we kind of ever had before. So that was really cool to see, really heartwarming.
Grow.
So yeah, just keep going up, keep on the grind, and can't tell you how much we appreciate it. It really is awesome to see. So that was our final look back for the 2024-2025 NFL season. Thank you all so much for watching this episode, the mini before this one, and stay tuned in until the one next week, which will, of course, be our Super Bowl predictions. We will do the full breakdown, not only who wins the game, but who wins each kind of position battle, quarterback, running back, receiver,
the game,
yada, 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 yada. Exactly. All your X factors that you can talk about will be talked about next week, finalizing with our final pick for the Super Bowl winner. So make sure you stay tuned in until next week to watch that episode. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.